Pre-season begins and the transfer merry-go-round continues apace as Daniel Levy, Vinay Venkatesham and Mad Marinakis continue their Mexican standoff over the future of Morgan Gibbs-White. I'll bring you the latest from those in the know within the transfer industry. Meanwhile, talk of Tottenham being the latest side to want to cherry-pick one of Bournemouth's best players, and Thomas Frank wants another former Brentford cohort into Spurs in case Sonny does decide to leave. I'll bring you all that and the best quotes from the Gaffer's first press conference as manager on today's episode of Tottenham Transfer News. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening wherever you are. Please do give this video a like. If you're on YouTube, please do press that subscribe button and the notification bell button for all my daily content. Tottenham transfer news every day throughout the window as things start to heat up. I'm recording this on Saturday morning about 9:15. I will be doing a watch along for the Tottenham versus Reading game this afternoon at 3 p.m. So keep an eye out for that and come and join us. And while the game's on, I'll be answering all of your questions in the chat. But let's get started as ever with the latest on transfers. And again, as ever, with the latest on the Morgan Gibbs-White situation. And Premier League transfer and finance expert Stefan Borson has had his say on what he hears is the most likely way that this will get wrapped up. He said the following: the end result is that to get this deal done, Tottenham are probably going to have to negotiate with Nottingham Forest a fee that includes not just the £60 million release clause, but a little bit extra to effectively buy themselves out of the dispute. Now, before I go on with more of Stefan Borson's quotes, I just want to say that, in my opinion, will boil Daniel Levy's piss. He will hate the idea of having to pay extra to get themselves out of a dispute because he doesn't feel, and I agree with him, that there is a dispute to be had. He doesn't feel like he's done anything wrong. How can he have done anything wrong? He didn't find out the release clause himself. The release clause number was brought to him. And that's what happens in football all the time. So for him to have to pay between £5 and £10 million extra to get this player, I have to say that is something that will be very indicative, in my opinion, of whether there's truth to the fact that Tottenham have this big investment that is being rumoured. Lots of people saying that maybe as much as £300 million has been invested into Tottenham's ownership group, ENIC, that is now being filtered down for us to spend. And that's why we've been able to go in for Gibbs-White so soon after Cudis. Well, I'll tell you this: if Daniel Levy is willing to pay £5 to £10 million more to get this deal over the line in time for Gibbs-White to come on the Asian tour, then that would show me there really is money to spend that Levy feels a lot more comfortable spending than he would otherwise. Borson did also say the other option for Spurs is, of course, to just walk away from the deal. And when talking about that, he said this: now, we've seen how in the past other teams have walked away in similar situations. Of course, we know that Liverpool walked away from the Virgil van Dijk deal when they initially had a dispute about it with Southampton, who were also alleging a tapping up situation, and that Liverpool walked away and came back in January to then go and get him later on. And it was for £75 million, wasn't it? So that was a huge deal at the time. Borson goes on to say, I wonder, though, in this scenario, whether Spurs could be as relaxed as Liverpool were. I can well imagine that Van Dijk told Liverpool that he was okay to wait 6 months, and Liverpool told Virgil van Dijk that they would definitely purchase him in January, and therefore they had a clear run on it. This, meaning Gibbs-White, is a scenario where it's a little less certain. For instance, if he had a good first half of the season, let's say, there could be other teams that would be interested in buying him. I think Borson is hitting the nail on the head here a little bit, and this is one of the things that could pressurize Levy into upping the bid a little bit, which is, everybody now knows, because of David Ornstein releasing the initial story about the £60 million release clause, everybody knows that that's there. So even before the start of the season, but agreed with what Borson is saying, if Gibbs-White were to have a good start to the season, first 6 months or so, everybody knows that they can just come in, pay £60 million, say to Marinakis, oh, well, I'm aware of the £60 million release clause because David Ornstein told me. And therefore Gibbs-White would be available to speak to other clubs. So in terms of Tottenham's situation, maybe it's a kind of now, or at least it feels like a now or never moment for them to maybe go and get Morgan Gibbs-White. And that is why maybe they're being tempted to pay that extra £5 to £10 million. Borson says this: that would be the most likely outcome, but I don't think anything's guaranteed, especially because Marinakis, being quite an aggressive and forthright business player, And that is the same on the Spurs side. So it's going to be interesting. And that's absolutely right, isn't it? You've got Daniel Levy against Marinakis here. I've mentioned it a few times in my videos over the past week. Daniel Levy, a kind of OG of Premier League chairman, I think he's the longest serving Premier League chairman, in fact. Marinakis, the new kid on the block, wanting to show that he is the smartest businessman in the room. And Daniel Levy being like, I don't think so, pal. So this is where the ego off is probably what's happening right now in the boardrooms. And it's probably frustrating for both Thomas Frank and Nuno Espirito Santo, because Nuno will want to know, am I going to have Morgan Gibbs-White available for our preseason trip to Portugal? And Thomas Frank will be like, are we going to have this player for the future and my start as Tottenham Hotspur manager? But the egos in the boardroom at the moment, they are butting heads, and neither one of them are going to want to give in first. So that is why I think this deal is still not happening. And it'll be really interesting to see whether Edu, the sporting director now of Nottingham Forest, who moved there from Arsenal, whether maybe he can have a word in Marinakis' ear and say, actually, for the kind of short to medium term future of our chances this season, it's probably better if we just let the deal happen and reinvest the money in the squad. Of course, everything we keep hearing from Nottingham Forest as well over the last few days is that they are lining up their ducks in a row, getting potential replacements for Morgan Gibbs-White in the door, or trying to. And I'm sure that's potentially holding up the deal as well. Thomas Frank had his first press conference as Spurs manager yesterday. I'll be bringing you quotes from that later in this episode. But he was asked about Morgan Gibbs-White. He said, "You know me so well. I will use what I've always said, and that is that I won't speak about players from outside the club." I mean, that's just common sense, isn't it? But the fact that he's being asked about it just shows that everybody knows there's no secret. And Nottingham Forest, they find themselves in a bit of a bind here, I think. I will say this, though. It's been kind of coming up on my mind. Tottenham had a similar issue when Chelsea came in for Luka Modric. When Luka Modric was Spurs' best player, Chelsea came in for him, and Luka Modric really wanted to join Chelsea at that point. And I think Chelsea bid, I want to say £30 million. It may even have been, do you know what? That's right, I've just remembered. Chelsea bid, I think, £50 million for Luka Modric. And Daniel Levy was like, no. And also, we're not going to sell him to one of our closest rivals. And then a year later, when Real Madrid came in, he sold him for £20 million cheaper. And Daniel Levy wasn't happy with what he deemed to be a kind of tapping up of the player. And Luka Modric kind of down tools for a little bit. But to be fair to Modric, he did then, when the season started, played really well and showed his commitment. So there is kind of previous in terms of Tottenham having been in a similar situation. And I have to say about Morgan Gibbs-White, I don't think he's the kind of player who would ever down tools. So if this kind of stalemate does go on into the beginning of the season, I can see him playing well for Nottingham Forest. And that is something that Tottenham will probably have to think about in terms of what Stefan Borson was saying. And maybe other clubs could take advantage of this if Gibbs-White plays well and has a good start to the season. So I still think this deal will go through. I think it'll be in the next few days. But one of those big egos in the boardroom is going to have to relent. Let's see what happens. Okay, a big story came out yesterday that Spurs are upping their interest in Bournemouth centre-back Ilya Zabarnyi, and are potentially ready to match Bournemouth's requested fee of €70 million, including add-ons, if the player opens himself up to a potential move. Now, for me, this one is still all about Christian Romero. There were some people on social media saying, oh, maybe it's because Thomas Frank wants to play a three at the back. Well, possibly, but we do have options, don't we? We have Kevin Danso, we have Radu Dragusin when he gets back from his ACL injury. So we do have four kind of top-level, kind of big money centre-backs. Maybe top level is a bit kind because Dragusin hasn't shown his best form for Spurs yet. And Danso, who I really like, still feeling his way into a Spurs shirt. Don't forget, we also have Ben Davies, who can play on the left of a three at the back. In fact, I would say, on the left side of the centre-backs and the three at the back, I would say he's actually far superior, Ben Davies, on the left side of a three in centre-back than he is in a two, in a kind of 4-4-2, in a four at the back centre-back formation. So that gives us an extra option as well. But for me, like I said, it's about Romero. If Romero leaves, then Tottenham are lining up in advance the kind of player they're looking to bring in. That's why they showed interest in Gay back in January. That's why they showed interest in Dean Howson before he moved to Real Madrid. And that's why they're showing interest in Ilya Zabarnyi now. But all the talk that came out of yesterday's press conference with Thomas Frank, where he's asked about Christian Romero, and I'll get into that, it didn't seem to me like anything is nailed on. And Atletico Madrid seem to have pulled out of talks. Real Madrid have already spent 50 million on Dean Howson. So I don't think there's anything obvious that's going to happen with Romero. And I have a feeling, and I'll talk about this a bit more later as well, that Thomas Frank is tempted and keen to ask Christian Romero to be his captain this coming season. Anyway, let's stick for the transfers for now. Brentford attacker Yoan Wissa is keen to explore a move away from Brentford this summer, with interest from Tottenham, Newcastle, and of course now Nottingham Forest as well, because they might be cash rich from the Morgan Gibbs-White deal, and of course already have 55 million in from the deal that took Elanga to Newcastle. It's understood that agreeing personal terms, particularly with either Tottenham or Newcastle, would not be an issue. And this is all according to Sammy Merkville from the BBC. So very reputable. Yoan Wissa still on Tottenham's list, someone that that former Brentford manager Thomas Frank wants in as part of his attack on the Premier League at Tottenham. And I can see why, because Wissa, like I've said before, always impresses me running the channels for Brentford. He is a tireless workhorse, good finisher as well, and Premier League proven quality, which of course is what Tottenham are really looking for this summer. Speaking of which, Spurs interested in yet another Crystal Palace player. This is their defender, Maxence Lacroix, and he really impressed me in the game between Crystal Palace and Tottenham at Selhurst Park last year. It was the game where Palace hadn't won a game in the Premier League yet, and they turned Spurs over. And Lacroix really put his body on the line and showed that he's a great man-to-man defender and half decent on the ball as well. I just think Tottenham being linked with far too many Crystal Palace players at the moment. I cannot see us buying. I can't see Palace selling basically all of these players. However, I did hear Steve Parish, their chairman, on Gary Lineker's podcast this week, talking about how there will be sales this summer. Well, Spurs are interested in Gueye, Eze, Lacroix, Adam Wharton. That's 4 players. So there's no chance Spurs are going to get all of those, and there's no chance that Palace are going to sell all of those, I wouldn't think. So I think this one is maybe one where we've got him on our list in the long term, and maybe it's one that we'll reevaluate in future transfer windows, but there's definitely interest there. In his press conference yesterday, Thomas Frank was asked about whether Son Heung-min should be allowed to decide his future. He said it's always tricky, situations like that. If that happens, right now I have a player that is fully committed and training well and will play tomorrow, meaning in today's Reading friendly. If a player has been at a club a long time, then there will always be a decision for the club to take, of course. And of course, the head coach and the guys who are in charge, and in this case, that will be Daniel and Johan, because there is something in it if someone wants to leave at a certain stage. Then there can be something there, meaning he could be allowed to move. But the club will always decide in the end, of course. Well, we've spoken about this a lot. I think Son Heung-min has earned his right to decide his future. And if a club comes in that he wants to join, and of course the money is right for paying off the last year of his contract, then I think we would all happily let Sonny leave. It would be lovely if he did leave, that we could give him a proper goodbye, which we weren't kind of able to give to Harry Kane, because after that Shakhtar Donetsk friendly game where we won, I think 4 or 5-0, and he scored 4, it was still not known for sure if he would leave for Bayern Munich. He then did. And of course, we did then have a friendly where we kind of applauded Harry Kane the season after, but it didn't feel quite right to me that we didn't get to say goodbye to him after all his service at the time. Thomas Frank was also asked relevantly about how Ange Postecoglou, when he started at Spurs, lost Harry Kane straight away. And how there's a chance that he would lose Son Heung-min at the beginning of his tenure. He said, yeah, first and foremost, Sonny is here now. I'm not worried too much about it. Let's take that 5 or 6 weeks down the line. That will probably be something I get asked the following week, so I'll practice my answers. Right now, he's here. So I think that really shows that if Sonny is going to leave Spurs, it will definitely be after the tour of Asia and obviously South Korea, because that's such a sponsorship boon for Spurs. And it will just be kind of further down the line towards the end of the window. Thomas Frank was also asked more about transfer potential signings for Spurs. He said, no doubt, if you want to compete in all the tournaments, you need a competitive squad, a robust squad. There's a lot of competitive players in our squad. It's exciting. There's no doubt the club is in the market and looking. I would like to speak when a player comes in and not about the market now. It's always a balance. The squad size, how big, how small should it be to compete? I know Tottenham. I know the players. I've seen a lot, but I need to know them one-to-one. I need to train them and get input every single day about them to give me more knowledge. But if you want to compete, you need to use the squad well. So that's Thomas Frank really saying he wants more players. He's not going to be more specific about who he wants, but he wants a squad that he feels in every position has 2 or maybe even 3 players in some positions to rotate and to really challenge each other. And I'm with him. That's something we didn't have last year. We weren't deep enough, and we suffered as a result. He was asked if specifically he would be targeting more players with Premier League experience. He said, I think it is a plus to have Premier League experience. I don't think it's the most important thing, though. For me, when I look at a player, I think, is it a good player? The ability is the most important thing. If it's a very good player, I don't think it's a problem whether they've played in the Premier League before or not. I do know it's very intense and very physical, but I don't think there are any problems for players to play here. Of course, at different times in their careers, things like that, but it's not the only thing we're looking into. So I would say a bit of fence sitting on there from Thomas Frank, kind of covering his back in case, we don't only buy players with Premier League experience. And I think that's the right thing to do. I have to say, I thought he came across very, very well in his first press conference yesterday. There was an article that came out this morning from Matt Law, who, by the way, all the rumors are that he's a big Arsenal fan. But article came out from Matt Law in the Telegraph about Frank's first press conference, and his headline was "Nervy Thomas Frank." Well, I watched it, and I don't think he was nervy at all. I think he came across excellently. Amazing communication skills, ability to be lighthearted, take the piss out of himself when necessary. He mentioned Arsenal at one point about how they were invincible once, and then he quickly went, "Oh, I shouldn't have mentioned that. That's my first schoolboy error." So, he's got excellent communication skills, and I don't know. I still just got a feeling, and we do and will have to remain patient at the start of this season because I think things will take time. But I've got a feeling that we've just got kind of a proper bloke in charge now, like a proper kind of modern bloke. And I talked about Ange being a proper bloke before and the kind of guy that you would like to meet and talk football with. And I agree. And I think it's the same with Thomas Frank. However, I think Frank is less spiky. That's the only difference. Ange is spiky, and often his spikiness would come after defeats or when trying to maybe push subjects into the foreground or pull subjects into the foreground to protect his players. He would use spikiness, but I don't think Thomas Frank is going to do that. I think he's just going to use kind of positive mental attitude, communication skills to try and get the press on side and protect his players and really just get a good positive feeling around Tottenham Hotspur. He was asked a little bit about what it means to be Spurs manager. He said, "I'm very proud to sit in this chair and be a part of the next chapter in Tottenham's history. I'll do everything every day to hopefully take this club to new heights. That's my ambition. I wouldn't do this if I didn't have big ambitions." And I think that just sums it up in a few lines, doesn't it? Before I go on to some of his other quotes, guys, just to say, please do, if you haven't already, give this video a like. Do subscribe if you're not already a subscriber to my channel. Daily Tottenham Hotspur transfer news and all the other news and views from the club during this transfer window. And also, you can listen on the audio platforms, be that Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Please do go over there, type in the Spurred On podcast to the search engine, give me a follow or a subscribe and a rating. All right. Thomas Frank was also asked about taking the Spurs job. He said, "I like to challenge myself. I've been that privileged that I've never been sacked before. That's one of the reasons I took the job. Get a little bit more risk in my daily life. Coming to a big club, there's pressure. We need to perform." So there's a little bit of that lightheartedness. And he was actually, the question that he was asked there was how he felt about the fact that 5 Spurs managers had been sacked in the time that he was Brentford boss. He just he batted it off really well. He was asked about expectations at Spurs. He says, "I think it's extremely positive that they won the Europa League. The first aim is that we need to be able to compete in all 4 competitions. That has to be the aim. I think 2019 was the last time they managed to compete in different competitions." He was also asked, of course, as all managers are at Spurs, about style of play. He said this: "Clear principles, all phases that hopefully you'll see. How we defend, but also how we attack. I want to play brave, aggressive, and attacking football. I'm convinced that we will score a lot of goals, but we need to be able to defend also if we want to win enough football matches. I haven't seen one single team have success without being able to defend. That's not saying that we don't want to attack. We need to be brave and have a nice mixture. We will be pragmatic sometimes when we need to be." So I think that really is where Thomas Frank is trying to say, this is how we're going to move on from Ange Postecoglou ball, where we did score a lot of goals, but we were too open at the back. We conceded far too many. And I think he's saying all the right things, basically. He was asked about his squad. He said, "I see happy players, positive and full of energy, hard at work, and they should be because they just won the Europa League." And he was asked, Thomas Frank, who he would name as his captain. He said, "I haven't decided on that yet. I have a long list of bullet points to get through. He was captain last season," meaning Son Heung-min, "and tomorrow we'll have 2 45 minutes as part of the friendly," meaning today's friendly against Reading, "and Sonny and Romero will be captains in both." He says they're 2 top players. Both have trained really well and set the standards. Both will play, and I'm very happy. He was asked on some injury updates. James Maddison is in part training with the team, which is a positive step. Says that Dragusin and Kulusevski are a little bit further away from returning. He was asked specifically about Kulusevski's injury, and he said, I don't want to put a time frame on it. Put it this way, he's not ready for the first game of the season. So that kind of scans with everything we've been told for quite a while, that his patella injury was worse than initially thought, and it's going to be a while before we see him. Thomas Frank was also asked about, also talked about Lucas Bergvall's recovery from injury. He said, Lucas Bergvall has been very good on the grass. He's trained every session, looks good. I'm very happy with that. So he's ready. That's great, because obviously Bergvall was injured for that Europa League season. And then, as I mentioned earlier, he was asked about Christian Romero specifically. He said, right now, Romero is here, and that's what I'm focusing on. As long as players are here, I'm training them, I'm playing with them. He's definitely here and very committed. I know he's looking forward to the season. So that kind of, for me, goes along with what we've been saying, really, that no club have been able to even get near to matching what it would take to get him out of Tottenham. I think Daniel Levy wants £80 million for Christian Romero, and Atletico or Real Madrid, they're going to have to bid that. He's a World Cup winner, a twice Copa America winner, and a Europa League winner. You can't get these guys up on the cheap. You just can't. Obviously, Thomas Frank was asked about the one big signing we have made this summer in Mohamed Cudis, and he said it's a great signing. Top work from Daniel, Vinay, and Johan in getting a really good player in ahead of pre-season. He gives us unpredictability in the game. His finishing is really good. He's almost the perfect age to not just perform, but also take it to the next level. I think in the first season at West Ham, he had a very good record in terms of goals and assists. Everyone is affected if a team is not performing at the top level for various reasons, meaning Cudis's last season wasn't quite as successful under Graham Potter and Lopetegui, who apparently he fell out with while at West Ham. Last year, for whatever reason, Frank goes on, West Ham struggled a little bit, so maybe it was difficult for him to produce the same numbers, but Cudis is a very good offensive player. He can score goals and create goals, and that's what we'll work on. I, for one, am looking forward to seeing Mohamed Cudis play in this afternoon's game against Reading. Hopefully he'll get a start and we can see him do some exciting things on the ball. Thomas Frank was asked how he felt about Daniel Levy in his interview with Vinay, saying that he wanted to win both the Champions League and the Premier League. He said this, I share his ambitions for the club. A club of this size should have that ambition. How far away we are is probably difficult to say, but we should throw it forward and go for it. No doubt that needs to be the aim for the future. What are the odds of us winning the Premier League this season? Well, I'm not allowed to gamble either, so I think we're probably not the favourites. Probably 3 teams at least ahead of us, but we'll do what we can to build a strong and competitive team. So some positivity from Frank there. In fact, the odds are 66-1 on Spurs to win the Premier League this season. I guess let's just see what happens. But I do love Frank's confidence, I have to say. And I'm really pleased. Frank was asked about Ange Postecoglou, and he said this, first and foremost, Ange will always be a legend here at Tottenham, one of only 3 who have won a European trophy and the first in 41 years. And for me, I don't think we need to talk badly or think negatively about Ange Postecoglou to still be positive and confident about Thomas Frank as he moves into his first games as Spurs manager. Ange Postecoglou supplied us with the best moment in my life supporting Tottenham Hotspur, and I will never forget that. And I can't wait until kind of the dust has settled a bit and we can hear Ange Postecoglou talking about Spurs positively and hopefully even maybe coming back to the lane at some point, and he will get a rapturous reception. I'm sure he will. And then Thomas Frank was just asked about his first memory of Spurs. And he said, I think it was the League Cup win in 1999 when Alan Nielsen scored the winner. That's probably the strongest memory. And that's right. That was against Leicester. Alan Nielsen, we were down to 10 men because Justin Edinburgh had been sent off because Robbie Savage got him sent off. And then suddenly Chris Armstrong, I think it was, breaks down the right at the old Wembley, gets a cross in. And Alan Nielsen just took a risk, making a deep run from his number 8 position, heads it past, I think it was Casey Keller in goal. Spurs in dreamland, absolute limbs, and a League Cup victory. Okay, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening and for all your support. Really loving talking to you guys every day about Tottenham transfer news. Please do give this video a like if you haven't already. Do subscribe to the channel. Press that bell button so you get notifications for all my content. And yeah, I'll be doing, as I said, the watch along for the 3 p.m. game, Reading versus Tottenham today. So do come and join me on my YouTube channel for that. Come on, you Spurs.